We can do it real quick. Brad Franz, Burke Incorporated. I'm the manager of online sourcing and quality.
I'm Arianne Larimer. I'm at PureSpectrum. I help all of our clients use our marketplace.
And I'm Jason Thomas. I'm at Symmetric, and I've been building panels for 40 years.
So what that main kind of introduction is: buyer, marketplace, technology, provider, owner of the kind of traditional panel asset. And that's where this conversation starts. I think, as we've heard in the last 2 days, there's some frustration around, it's been 10 years. Why are we still trying to solve the same problem? And frankly, it's because we're all trying to solve it differently. We're all trying to address and call a spade a spade. We're all trying to point fingers, too. It takes collaboration. It takes understanding quality as nuance, that it's not dupes and frauds that we're trying to fight against. It's a combination of the respondent experience with the technology piece. Fraud's going to follow money. And in our industry, we're always going to have those kind of very intentional, malicious intent. But as opposed to this mutually assured destruction that we are kind of on a path for, but that is easily preventable if we start peeling back the layers and understanding how it impacts what quality is. And so the idea of a buyer, a survey owner that's hosting a 10-minute survey, that does the right thing, that we've heard it before of that surveys have to be 10 minutes. But what does that mean when an individual is bouncing around routers for 15 minutes before they ever touch my study? I did everything right, but that respondent feels like it's a 25-minute engagement, and two things suffer: is the respondent's incentive and then my data. And the reality, too, is the owners of this data hold so much power in terms of what the survey experience are, but we need to be able to work together to identify that there's components of this that I can't control, that I have to leverage partnerships to fix. We've seen with research on research an individual get commissioned through an exchange platform who was bought through an individual partner that is claiming to have proprietary insights, that is masquerading traffic, that bought from another exchange that was then supplied from the end partner. So we're only able to trace 5 pieces of this puzzle. But somebody commissioned that individual, and then the survey respondent took the study. There are 6 steps in between source origination and in the supply, or in the end survey. And what we all know is that for 10 years, we've been treating those people like a commodity. And so when that individual, and let's be very clear, and we're all in this room right now, is every single one of those people in that ecosystem got paid. And it all came out of the respondent's incentive. So we need to do a little bit more than kind of waxing poetically about it's the respondent that matters, and do something about it together. So for the last 6-8 months, I'm grateful that we've kind of had a roadshow. We've spoken at CRC. We've had some online conversations. We put out some articles of what are tangible takeaways. How do we actually fix this problem together? What are the trade-offs? If you've got a 30-minute study, what does that actually mean to an end client? So we'll start this conversation by another thing we've heard in the last 2 days is, why do we treat people the same? If an individual is a respondent who's being pushed from a traffic, from an intercept from a modern river versus a traditional panel. Jason, you own a traditional...
I own the most
community.
Traditional panel in the industry. So my panel was built in 1980 as a mail panel. In 1995, I moved that online as one of the first online panels. It wasn't before Greenfield and a few others, but it was early. So, and that's what I call the good old days, is 95 to about 2010. That's the golden age of online research. It's going to blow some of your minds because you're much younger than I am, but response rate's 25%. Piece of cake. I mean, life is good. There was no Google AdWords. You could just put a website up, and I was getting 5,000 people a day just sign up on my website for free. I mean, just to take surveys, and my panel is very traditional. You are signing up to take marketing research surveys and voice your opinion. That is all you're doing. You're not earning online currency. You're not getting Facebook points. You're trying to shape the world and make it a better place. So, you know, back in 95 to 2010, high response rates. Fraud was not that big of an issue. But then we had 2 events that I call man-made disasters that happened to this industry. The first one is cheaper and faster. Cheaper and faster is the death of proprietary panels. You might go, why? Well, let's look at faster. Faster means you're now oversampling to fill your survey in 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. A normal survey should be done 5 to 7 days. You want to send out a pure sample file, a reminder 2 days later. More sample is not going to close, but now when you're sending out 10,000 emails to get 100 completes in an hour, I have 8,000 panelists that are logging in going, survey full? That's a huge, imagine if you were invited somewhere, you show up and they say, survey, we're full, get out of here. Well, I have an invitation, it's only 2 hours old, how's it full? So that's disaster number one, is oversampling by making it go faster. Disaster number two is cheaper. No, this is still part of the same disaster, I'm sorry. So when you go cheaper, we have never cut the panel members' incentive. They get paid $1 for every 5 minutes. Once it goes over 30 minutes, it's more like $2 every 5 minutes. So we pay well above minimum wage. We pay them fairly, but because we do that, I have a tenure of 3.5 years per panelist. I can do iHuts with them at an 80% response rate. I can do, we do car clinics out in California. I'll email my local panel members and say, I need you at the Honda dealership to do car clinics. They'll show up and do it. I can do online qual, I can do in-person qual because I've built a relationship. Speed kills that. Cheapness kills that. I've never cut the incentive. I've cut my profit margins to compete with everybody else in the room because my incentives are so much higher. My incentive alone is higher than your CPI. But I have a panel that responds, and they're there for 3.5 years on average. The other man-made disaster, which is by far the worst, and I thought it was going to be our savior, is routing. I think routing is a piece of crap. When I was first introduced to routing, and it was really, talking to Patrick and Lucid and all that, and we jumped on Lucid back in 2011. We were one of the first ones in there because we don't deploy a router. We're purist, sample purists. So I was like, you've developed a system where I can email my panel member, and if they don't have a survey that they fit right at that time, you can quickly find them another one. I thought, this is brilliant. This is going to save the industry. But then there were no best practices put into it. So for Symmetric and our panels, which are owned by Decision Analysts, we limit routing to 2 minutes. If you can't find my person a survey within 2 minutes, they're done. But, there's people out there routing 15, 20 minutes. By the time they get to your survey, your data quality sucks. I mean, I heard on day one, a lady, I think she was from Michaels, and she said, 7 to 9 minutes is the ideal survey time. It might be for some audiences, but overall, that's bullcrap. I mean, if you're routing for 15 minutes and you take a 15-minute survey, that's a 30-minute survey. If you're paying people properly and you take them out of the router and you get them pure, they've just now fresh online and straight to your survey, you can do 30-minute surveys. You can do 45-minute surveys. You're just doing 45-minute surveys, but half of it's done routing where they're being asked gender, age, ethnicity over and over again, and they're already pissed off.
So what's the so what? What's the trade-off that people need to know? How do we do the mutually assured sustainability, right?
Really, it falls to this group here. Most everybody here is a panel provider or they work for an aggregator. We all have to protect the asset. This is oil. This is gold. There's only so much of it. And, the shocking thing is that 95 to 2010 range, internet penetration was a fraction of what it is now. Yeah. Smartphones weren't around. And, everybody has a smartphone. They can take surveys anywhere. You would think the trajectory of online panels and online sample would be skyrocketing, and instead it is falling, it is cratering. I mean, we are all fighting for the same people, and we have people that are letting them route 40 times a day, and we're having other people that just like, nope, we're not letting them route, we're going straight to a survey, and I think we all need to sit with guidelines and follow those guidelines. That's better router practice guidelines, and that's panel management guidelines. For me, if my panelist takes a screener, they're not allowed to take another screener for 3 days. If they take a survey, they're not allowed to take another survey for 5 days. Unless, of course, we're in a situation where a client delayed a study, but we already pulled a sample, we have to do that. But we have to protect the panelists because we're killing them. But incentive is the way to do it. Respect is the way to do it, not routing them for 15 minutes. Everybody that has their panel and router, limit it to 5 minutes or less, and the data quality is going to improve. It's not going to fix it, but it will improve because you're just beating people up for money.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I find interesting, because working with Brad and working with the specific type of surveys that Brad is working on, and working with Jason, which is a great panel that's a great fit for a lot of the work that Brad does. I also work with customers who do have the shorter surveys and who do need the really quick, but some of these platforms are actually kind of the newer ones where it's you see some content and you have a couple of questions, 2 or 3 questions, you get demographics passed through, so you have those faster processes. But I think one of the interesting things I saw from Chuck and Big Nash and some of the other conversations, even about respondent experience, is sort of the contradictory information about if respondents get to choose what information they provide and have more control over their privacy, it actually can be kind of higher correlated with fraud because they're not providing that information. So, where do you kind of find that sweet spot? And what I've found from the marketplace perspective and what we've actually seen from the data is really, I kind of think about fraud from like 2 places. There's the fraud of the validating who the respondent is. Are they who they say they are? Are they coming in and actually providing the right information? And that's one piece of it, and there's a lot of things that we all are doing with technology on that piece right now. Then there's sort of the second piece, which I was talking to a customer who had a data set and said 80% of the respondents said that they used Facebook Pay. That doesn't seem right. Like this is bad data because there's no way 80% of the respondents are using Facebook Pay. But the thing that I look at is, well, where did those respondents come from? Did they come from a single panel source where maybe those respondents actually were recruited on some level via Facebook affiliates, so they were actually all using...
So it's not bad data, it's bad design.
Right, there's the design component.
The design and the need to blend samples to prevent this. So,
yeah,
yes.
and I think on that point, that's sort of where, from the marketplace perspective, it's, as we look at these sort of blips of fraud that pop up, a lot of times it's kind of one panel at a time. I think Sandy mentioned, there's a YouTube channel where people are talking about how to commit fraud, how to get through that. And what we've seen is, if I'm running a survey that has multiple panels on it, if there's bad data, the first thing that we look at is this coming from one source? More often than not, it is that a single source at one time has kind of gotten hacked, per se. And what we can do is actually turn that source off, talk to the source and say, here's what we're seeing, here's how you can actually maybe change something in that, and then once those patches have been made, we can turn them back on, bring them back in the marketplace. But back to sort of the Facebook example, what that also means is that one way to protect that when you are running a survey is to actually diversify your sources. And if you, rather than just have one, you have a controlled number where you know who the panels are, you know which sources you're using, and you limit them, and this is some research on research that we've actually done as well, you limit each panel source or maybe source groups to no more than 20% of the total sample size. What you end up with is a protection measure where rather than having 80% say Facebook Pay, maybe in that one panel where that is true, that's the behavioral set, but then across different panels, you're gonna get a much less biased and a much more diverse response. And I think that that's kind of the second component of what you guys can do is actually intentionally do some blending, do some control over that so that you're, on the one hand, we're using technology to validate respondents. On the other hand, we're identifying for this particular opportunity, what's the right source, what are the right sources, and how do we make those trade-offs?
All right, so I think we can all agree or disagree. That's the whole purpose of this. We've got a couple different kinds of clients. We have clients that care tremendously about their source and they understand the implications of sampling. We have clients that have been burned in the past and they've been forced to care. Or we have clients that don't know they need to care and clients that frankly don't care. So from a technology piece, and maybe this is an unfair question for you too, is where's the responsibility then to coach that individual buyer to say, as opposed to this is our design to intentionally limit 20%, but in a marketplace that promotes transparency, they have the option to flip the switch. They can say, that source is cheaper, that source is faster, but that also gives you vulnerability.
Right.
So where do you think the responsibility lies between you and then all the way upstream?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, is it fair for me to say that I think it's a shared responsibility? And
Weird.
Well, I think that there's things that we can control. There's things that Jason can control. There's things that you can control. And then there's things that we can control together. I think the link hashing and the link security is one that is obviously a shared responsibility. I think on the panel side, it's the how are you recruiting? How are you doing those things? On the marketplace side, it's the what are the layers that we're putting in to ensure that if you're sending in valid respondents, that we're actually, doing another layer of deduping respondents, we're checking their device IDs, and then we're also doing additional things to ensure that the data points like Chuck and Vignesh are mentioning about what we know is correlated with an invalid sort of fraudulent respondent. How can we block those individuals before they get to your survey, regardless of which panel that they're actually coming from, but still being able to provide you the information so that you can make the choices of, what kind of panel is this within the marketplace? Is it something that's more traditional like Jason's, or is it some of the newer tech with the programmatic sources that are, you're able to get a lot cheaper and a lot faster, but with less of the sort of full validity of kind of who that person is. And I think it really is just having the information so you can make those choices, but then each of us kind of owning what's the survey respondent experience, what are you doing, how are you asking open ends, how are you doing those things, and really kind of all talking about it.
Does that change for you as an owner of the supply?
No.
All of the above.
All of the above. As we're talking, you can control things on your end, you can control things on my end, I can control things on my end. But there's so many other factors out there that we're playing into. So I still am really big on, the cost of research has gone up tremendously, even though we're selling it cheaper and faster. I have to employ a fraud team now. I only have a company of 25 people, but 3 of them check fraud all day long. They're reading open ends. Even if you are not putting open ends on the survey that you're programming, that you're using my sample for, when you redirect back to me, I have open ends. I'm asking them in detail, what was the survey about, and asking them parts of it. If they can't answer that, I'm going back to the client and saying, I know they made it through, get rid of them, we're refilling, you're not paying for those completes. I think all of us out here have to really take a look at, are we getting rid of bad panelists fast enough and blocking them from signing up again as best we can? So we don't have a 3-strike rule. We have a 1-strike rule. If you cheat, you're gone, because I'm giving you a high cash incentive. That's the deal. I'm paying you fairly, and in return, you take my surveys seriously.
Unfair question for you now.
Yeah.
We know that there's nuance to quality. And so we know that there's malicious intent, there's an individual bad actor, there's groups, there's communication. But we have seen, and I'm sure everybody in the room has seen too, is bad data isn't just fraud. It's the good person hitting the wrong opportunity or at the wrong time. So an individual thinks it's a 10-minute study, they're on a train, they can't proceed with it. That's a good person who did the wrong thing. I have a very strange relationship with open ends. I am incredibly sympathetic that finger mashing in an open end in a survey with context is not indicative of bad quality. It could be indicative that you wrote a bad survey.
Yes.
Right? And so
Yes.
with a 1-strike policy, to push you a little bit, is that an outdated thought?
No, I do have a 3-strike policy on an open end not being as loquacious as it should be. But I'm talking about, you said here you're a doctor, you said here you're a lawyer. You selected a multiple response question that had 4 fake items on it and you picked all 4. You're out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trash to me. Why risk that with another client? I mean, I'm just opening up to be reconciled later with another client. I mean, I paid $7 or $8 for that member to join, and now I'm throwing them away and blocking them from joining again. So I think we all need to be more aggressive with the bad actors. I think we all need to be more kind to the panelists and stop letting your people route so long. That is what's destroying data quality, in my opinion, is how long they're routing and just being beat to death with the same questions over and over again. I mean, routing is good in some ways, but all this technology we've come up with has really benefited the client and it's benefited us financially. It hasn't benefited the panel member. Yeah. If it did, we would not be having this conversation, because we would have millions upon millions of people, with internet penetration and cell phone penetration these days. Everybody would be joining, because it'd be fun.
Yeah, but I would argue too that there's, I think a lot of the younger generation, and even like for me, I don't belong to a panel, not just because I work in the market research industry and I'm not allowed to, but also.
Oh, you do that competitive employment question and you are honest every time?
Yeah. But if I were to take surveys, it's unlikely that I would be doing it from the panel environment. I am somebody who, what I would love to do is, like, if I'm like scrolling on Instagram and I get that ad that targets me, and I'm like,
you're a river sample person.
Yeah, I would be, right? Because I'm like, I do want to buy those shoes, and yes, I would love 20% off to take a survey right now, so I can buy those. And so I think that's where it is, how do we actually understand the trade-offs of any given different source that
Yeah.
I would be taking it for an incentive in that moment for something that I want versus a long-term panel relationship. And I think that there's a lot of respondents out there that, you know, that's kind of why I really do believe in the blending of sources and having, you know, mitigating your bias by working with.
No, blending sources is a must. I mean, and this is something OTX did 20 years ago that was revolutionary. This is why I immediately was drawn to Lucid when they came out, because Comer was part of that. Blending sources erases biases. I mean, we had to talk about this in more detail at CRC, where we're talking to a different audience than you guys, but blending is a godsend. I mean, blending is what we should all be doing. Blend properly.
Yeah, but I also, you know, I think that the river sources are, there are quality respondents
Oh,
going
no,
through
River's
there,
a
right?
blend.
So-
River's part of that blend. I mean, River's great.
So from CRC, one of the best feedback we got was around this topic, right?
Yeah.
It was a new individual that has not been
Yeah.
tainted by an environment that mistreated a respondent whose motivation is not understood, right?
Yeah.
And so to recap, to put words in your mouth, correct them when I'm wrong here in a second, but that offers fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Those are critically important in the right opportunity. But if I'm doing a 15-minute segmentation where I can't trace back an individual from their source origination, their motivation is disconnected. Their motivation is not this beautiful, lovely study that Burke created. They're always beautiful and lovely. Their motivation is to get back to what they were doing and get their incentive and come back. And so one of the key trade-offs, especially in CRC when we're talking to corporate researchers, is ask those questions, talk to those partners, and be able to have transparency to the source, because there is a extreme benefit on both sides.
Yeah, transparency is key. I mean, we just have to be honest. If you have a proprietary panel, tell us. If you are outsourcing to this company, tell me, because if I'm already using them, then I'm going to have a bunch of DNQs, my survey is not going to be filled, and I'm firing you and never using you again, because, I mean, I've looked like an ass in front of my clients. So, you know, the other big issue that we haven't talked about at all that I think is a killer to what we're doing is DIY platforms. I mean, this is a complete... So I have a
Thank
panel.
you, Jason.
Yes, not like that. I'm talking survey platforms. When you take the expertly written questionnaire out of the Burke's hands or out of the
Again,
decision
always
analyst's
pretty,
hands
always
or
right.
out of a full service market research, and you have a client that's cheap, a client that wants to program it in SurveyMonkey, the free version, not even the paid version. They can't do redirects. You know, my panel members are now stuck on question 7 because the survey is so poorly written, they have nowhere to go. I mean, they're not going to come back next time. So, thank you.
So let me do this. We've got 6.5 minutes, and I know questions hopefully come up. We're going to do discussion groups, and that's where we want to keep this going. We're actually going to be split apart, and we're going to tag team with the other panel. Sandy brought up something that I think is a good opportunity, and we haven't discussed this yet, is more so about what we are doing from our vantage point, specifically to help now some of this fraudulent behavior. Sandy, I lost you on where you're at, but she talked about the lack of time between an individual participating in a study who has been flagged now for, we'll go fraud or disengagement, bad data, to when we're actually caught, when they're actually removed, when they're quarantined, when they've been identified. It could be a month and a half, depending on that field time. Okay, so from our vantage point, one thing that we're talking to our partners a lot about, and this is what Vignesh was talking about too, is these redirects, encrypted redirects. But I would take that a step further and go, encrypted redirects are fantastic because ghost completes don't affect me, right? They affect my partners, which affects our relationship, which affects our ability to track completes in an appropriate time. But my data's not affected by a ghost complete, but I need to be a champion for that. And there's a layer up of this that as an industry, we need to see more comprehensive redirects that are more specific around data quality. And I would like to even see redirects that focus on the fraudulence, the malintent versus disengagement. Because if I can pass those back real time, even through a programmatic means or even directly to JSON, we're ensuring that fraudulence is not being incentivized in the moment. So I know that feels like we're closer to that. And I feel like that's a huge step in the right direction where I hope everyone in the room as a data collection provider embraces the encrypted redirect. I think, I don't want to speak for you guys, I think we are, but then you hold us accountable that we can't do work or charge us more. There's there's a surplus, there's a cost to replenish associated with that CPI if you cannot guarantee that in-survey data checks are being passed back real time. They'll be post-clean, and we'll deal with that later, but let's not let perfection get in the way of significant improvement. So I would vote from a vantage point to help. We will embrace the idea of granular, accurate redirects that help solve a problem real time.
And that's just solving a problem now. They're going to figure out something else in a month that's different. I mean, it's the cheater's job to be one step ahead of us. We catch up, and then they're one step ahead of us. And so right now, it's the redirects that are not secure. Who knows what it'll be next time?
But mutually assured sustainability.
We have to keep communicating as a group and battle it all together. We don't want to hide from it, but best practices. It's best practices of using the PureSpectrum system. Don't let them run forever. Use these providers for long surveys. Use these providers for short. It's thinking. It's not just pushing a button. It's putting thought into things, and that's what we should all be doing.
Yeah.
So what's your gift to sustainability?
Gift to sustainability. Well, first of all, I appreciate that you are willing to pay a little bit more for the quality, because I think that is, one of the challenges and one of the trade-offs. As a marketplace, you can access both sides of that spectrum, right? But what we're doing as a marketplace, we have PureScore, which is our machine learning algorithm. Jason, to your point, it is constantly evolving. As we learn that there's something new, we're learning very quickly. And this
you're the first alert. I mean, you guys that are having all the different panels, and you can be the first alert. Hey, guys, we see a problem. Fix it.
Right.
Okay, now it's moving over here. Fix it.
Exactly.
So,
great. On the reconciliation aspect, it's how do we learn those things and then block those respondents before they get to the survey. So, you're not having to toss out quite as many on the back end. It's much more about, all right, we've identified all of these little behaviors, the little, the not answering, right? The not wanting to provide a response or things like that. What are the little correlations that we understand makes what has been defined as a bad respondent versus a good respondent, and then learning that over time so that, we're blocking them. They don't get to your survey, but we're continuing to learn because there will be something new. And so we're just heavily investing in being ready to, to kind of prevent that as soon as we see it.
And the opening day, Rachel and team had talked about maybe forming a group, a new organization that's outside of our organization that no one has any influence on, that gives the seal of approval. You have a proprietary panel, you're doing it the right way, you're routing properly, right, not letting it go for 30 minutes, and you're paying $5,000 a year to be part of this. Yeah. But you get the seal, you get a voice, but we've got to do something that we all come together on, because if I decide to tighten up security, I can't get as many completes. Some of my clients are coming out to you guys, and if you're not following the same guidelines, you're filling up with junk, and then we're just hurting each other. So.
Yeah. I also think that there is room for it to not be a one-size-fits-all. When you're staying in a hotel, sometimes you might want to choose the Mountain View suite. Sometimes you might want the Lakeview suite. Sometimes I might want to buy fast fashion because I have a very low budget and I just need a cute dress to wear to a party. Sometimes I'm going to a wedding and I want, a nice Rent the Runway dress, right? I make those choices myself too on a daily basis, and I think there's a lot of companies out here that might have really low budgets. They're starting up. They want some level of research, but they can't necessarily afford what you can afford. So I think that as we think about these standards, it's how do we do that in a way that actually does allow for the different sides of the coin.
No, and that's the great thing about the exchanges. It gives everybody the opportunity to do marketing research was important. But a lot of them are doing poor marketing research because they're designing their own surveys and they can't write a survey. So, but at least they're trying. So I'm going to look at the positive. I've been very pessimistic, but that's my positive spin. They're trying. So.
You're trying. We appreciate that.
Yeah. So.
Well, and that's the key, and that's why we've been having this conversation for a year is I can't fix it. Now, I have a significant responsibility to educate our clients on these trade-offs. We were talking in the breakout room there is one of the things that's resonated most in a recent example is this, you can tell the individual who writes the RFP that doesn't actually understand what commercial research is. It's got a little bit more academic front, and it's this idea of it's a 25-minute non-mobile and I want acculturated Hispanics. Yeah, the giggle's correct, by the way. But to understand and kind of coach and educate on the idea of these are not only the implications to data quality, but this is why it has a direct line to revenue or a direct implication that your survey data will be flawed. It's a segmentation. So all that hard work you do on the front end to make sure it's balanced and you get those individuals in based on census, we know those, if design is not changed individuals are dropping out at a higher rate than a Caucasian counterpart at things as high as a 30 to 50% clip. So all of a sudden now these incredibly expensive decisions that corporate researchers are making are now flawed because of design. It's flawed because we picked the wrong motivation to incentivize. So I implore all of us to be able to treat these like partners and have the conversation. I have a part to do in this, and I want to be a champion for this mutually assured sustainability, just like you guys.
Yeah.
Great.
I see zeros.
We're out of
We're at
time.
zeros, so we should move on, I guess.
Great.
We good?
Good.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it,
Thank
guys.
you.